Shabbat Shalom, everyone. I'm so grateful for the joy of today because we desperately need it. And I have to share that my words today are not so joyful. So it is what it is. This coming Tuesday marks Shloshim, the 30-day period of mourning after the October 7th massacre and kidnapping of 240 individuals, including babies, children, women, men, and elders into Gaza. The ritual of Shloshim is not widely observed today in our community per se, but it serves an important function in the overall trajectory of grief and healing in our tradition. Unlike the 7 immediate days of Shiva, where there is no expectation of doing anything other than grieving and feeling the aftermath of a loss while being surrounded by community and family and loved ones, Shloshim, in this 30-day period, offers an opportunity to check in, an opportunity for reflection. So in that spirit, today I'm going to be sharing some personal thoughts, feelings, and struggles at this inflection point. And I think it took me a few weeks to be able to say what I'm saying, because we've all been processing and figuring out where our hearts are in terms of being able to articulate that. So I say that I'll offer these words personally, but it's still only a glimpse, because in some ways the 28 days feels like no time at all, and it also feels like eternity, like everything in the world has changed forever. And I will say that I'm only speaking for myself and not assuming anyone else's thoughts. And I hope that my sharing with you and giving this chance to pause will give you the chance to pause and reflect, to feel and to honor whatever it is that you are feeling or struggling with. Even if we disagree on every single detail, we can be in community and dialogue together. So I'll start with the simple reflection that these last 28 days have been among the most intense, painful, heavy, and destabilizing of my entire life. And I say that as someone who lives in America, who has not been to Israel since my children were born, though we had a plane ticket that was canceled due to COVID. Someone who did not have a direct relative or friend killed in the violence on October 7th or in the war since, though I do have many second and third degree connections, including through members of SAJ. I think, like most of us, the initial grief of October 7th was just simply overwhelming. The scale, the scope, the brutality, the inhumanity, pure evil. The kidnapping of anyone, let alone 9-month-old babies and 85-year-old Holocaust survivors, is beyond comprehension, beyond imagination. In addition to grief, I have felt despair at the fact that those targeted and killed and kidnapped were among the most peace-loving, protesting against the anti-democratic government coalition, two-state solution-seeking people there are in Israel, including 75-year-old Vivian Silver, a friend and colleague to many of my friends, who is the founder of Women Wage Peace, a women-led interfaith, Muslim, Jewish, Christian, etc., grassroots peace movement whose leaders have spoken at SAJ in the past. And I feel that this must have been part of some of the psychological strategy. A message that says, or at least I learned from that, this is not about beliefs. This is just about the fact that you are on this land that makes you deserving of torture and death. Vivian Silver is captive. She was not, hopefully not killed. Like others, I also was surprised by how few people reached out to me in the wake of the attack. Colleagues who were among the first to call me after Pittsburgh, one who even called me before I knew what had happened because I was on a plane when that happened, silent, completely silent. Interfaith organizations that I am part of putting out PARV, two-side statements before any incursion or siege of Gaza. And I feel deeply sad. And I hope that this sadness and this silence is temporary until the dust settles and I have time for some hard conversations. But I feel as though my world has gotten a lot smaller since October 7th. And I don't like that. I want to live in an expansive, connected world of love, and it's deeply hurtful. After the initial shock and the feelings of isolation, I also want to articulate that I have been sitting with a lot of anger, probably the most predominant feeling that I have right now, not pretty. A lot of anger and outrage that there has not been and is not more universal condemnation of Hamas and a recognition of Hamas as a terrorist organization. And I want to be really clear. This is not to say that Israel does not have a history of violence to contend with in its formation, just like our country and others have been founded on violence and oppression. This is not to ignore the fact that Israel's treatment of Palestinians in the West Bank is problematic and has gotten worse with the ascension of an ultranationalist coalition which betrays basic human and Jewish values. This is not to say that Israel's leadership has made a two-state peaceful solution nearly impossible. Israel has a lot to contend with. And the current coalition is exacerbating facts on the ground and making it even harder to pursue peace. But as my colleague Rabbi Yael Rydberg has said to me, the Israeli-Palestinian conflict is complicated, but what happened on October 7th is not. Hamas does not seek the good of the Palestinian people. As an independent entity, they have significant money coming in that they could have used to build up an economy, yet 80% of Palestinians in Gaza are unemployed. They build their operations in hospitals and community centers. They build tunnels for their fighters instead of shelters for their citizens. That is not a group of people who want peace, do not want anything other than the destruction of Israel. And that is not something we can be forgetting at any point in this conversation. A group of people that clearly had access and capability of engaging in even more significant death and destruction. This is not just a conflict, this is an existential threat. And there's no country that doesn't have a basic right to defend itself from those who want to actively harm its citizens. Of course, and to my surprise and dismay, not only has there been a hesitation to call out Hamas, not only has there been a conflation of this massacre with the complications of the Israeli-Palestinian conflict in the West Bank, which are connected but different, there are those who have praised the killing and kidnapping as Jews as acts of resistance and publicly greeted it with quote unquote jubilation. I have spoken over the last few weeks about dehumanization and how present that is on both sides. But I think the time I felt it mostly in my bones was when I first saw people taking down the posters of the kidnapped individuals violently in the West 4th Street station. And I was with Mint, and I explained to Mint the context of what was happening. It was just a few days later. And Mint said, well, they're really mad about what's happening to Palestinians. And I said, yes, but I would hope and pray that there is never a world in which if there were kidnapped Palestinians that I would ever tear down a poster, that I would ever diminish the humanity of those people. And it's ongoingly painful. There are so many different versions of how this is affecting everyone personally. And again, I know that I have very clear that there are people with all different views about Israel, and I still hope that we can all agree that the common humanity is necessary in this moment. People who many of us thought were friends and colleagues have spoken out in ways that harm Jews, further anti-Semitic stereotypes, and dehumanize us. And where do we go with that? How do we continue to face folks that celebrated the victory of a friend's cousin and then have a pleasant work meeting with them? Oh, it's cut off. And while I am further away from the voices on the right, I know that they are there. I know that there are those who are also calling for the dehumanization, the obliteration of Palestinians, and that's not acceptable, never acceptable. Humanity to tropes of anti-Semitism or Islamophobia in this moment. We have to expand our hearts. We can grieve for both. We can grieve for everyone. As I have seen in a meme being shared on social media that says this: it is okay to be heartbroken for more than one group of people at a time. And I think this is something that we can take away from this Torah portion as well. I'm so sorry, I'm so thirsty. Parshat Vayera is defined in many ways by a lack of empathy. You have Abraham who calls out for the righteous, to seek righteous people in Sodom, but you also have Abraham turning his back on Sarah, sending her, as we read today, to be with the Egyptian king, to be with, or I don't know if it was Egyptian in this story or the next, but to be with another person, to send away Hagar, to not empathize or sympathize with Sarah. Sarah's turning on Hagar and turning her away. This Torah portion is rife with a lack of empathy. Yet our tradition offers a bit of a tikkun on this Torah portion, a bit of a repair on this Torah portion. It says in our tradition that the ram's horn, the shofar, which comes from our portion this week when Abraham is going up and is trying to sacrifice, or is going to follow the instruction to sacrifice Isaac, and he looks and sees a ram's horn and knows he does not have to sacrifice Isaac, he knows he has to sacrifice this ram instead. Our tradition teaches us that when we hear the sound of the shofar, we're supposed to be hearing the cry of Hagar, hearing the cry of Sarah, who had to bear the fact that her husband went and did this awful thing, the cry of the mother. And then there is another tradition that says that we blow the shofar 100 times to remember the mother of Sisera. The mother of Sisera was a sworn enemy, a general of the other side, quote unquote. And on Rosh Hashanah, we are supposed to hear the cry of the enemy's mother. There is no limit to our humanity. There is no limit to our ability to be present for pain, even if we believe we need to defend ourselves. And lastly, for now, I want to just say that as we mark this 30-day period this coming Tuesday. I am struggling with how we're going to move forward as a people and as human beings in a world and a time where it is a norm to reduce hundreds, if not thousands of years into conflict, into oversimplified analysis, black and white, two sides, you're with me or against me thinking, and even a lot of the moral superiority and smugness that I have witnessed on the left the last few weeks. And dealing with the conflict of land, religion, power, and history, a both-and mentality is needed more now than ever. Something that shuns hard judgments of right and wrong and opens to curiosity and condemns the hubris of claiming to know all the answers. If someone can figure out how to get the hostages home safely, preserve the life of innocent Palestinian civilians, keep the 7 million Jewish Israelis and 2 million non-Jewish Israelis safe from existential threat, then they deserve the prize of prize. But no one has that exact answer. And until then, I hope and pray that especially within the Jewish community, we can struggle over certainty, conversation, and dialogue without unfriending, and while being open to the humanity and the humility of not knowing, or at least not knowing all of the truth, and being open to hearing the partial truth of the other. And I hope we can, from our own truths, we can speak, and we cannot give up on any of those commitments to get the hostages home, to preserve life and dignity for innocent Palestinians, to keep those who live in the land safe, and to dedicate ourselves to supporting a pathway toward long-term peace. Because what's happening now is a reaction. It does not address the long term. And I want to conclude by saying that I think we have great models of resilience among the Israeli society that has bonded together in mutual aid, regardless of political perspective, regardless of background, and in the resilience of so many whose suffering losses and whose family members are still kidnapped, who are finding a way forward and lighting it for all of us. So I want to conclude with one more bit of Torah that I think speaks to this point. As I mentioned earlier today, the Torah portion is Vayera, and God appeared, referring to God's visit to Abraham in the tent. Vayar, Vayera, Vayar is a refrain in the Torah portion and becomes a theme in the Torah portion. And 2 times in particular, it has striking mention. As I mentioned, Abraham saw the ram, same word. He saw all of a sudden another path. He saw for himself a different way. Hagar in the desert, so desperate, thirsty, hungry, feeling like she was going to die, casts her own son away from her and sits at a distance, in which God comes to her and promises her that he too will be a great nation. And then the Torah says, God opened her eyes and she saw the well. The well may have been there all along, but she had to have her eyes opened. She had to have her eyes opened by someone else, by God in this case. And in a Reconstructionist lens, we would say that that is the responsibility of all of us, to be there to open each other's eyes, to help each other see new truths, to help each other see ourselves, to insist on talking and opening up, to insist on the dignity of all human life, and most importantly, to help each other find hope and be hope so that we do not feel alone and so that we can walk this path forward together as a community. Shabbat Shalom. So we're going to offer a prayer for the hostages, the quick release of the hostages, and then we'll put the Torah back. Acheni kol beit Yisrael hantunim b'tzara u'shiv'a hamakom yirachem aleihem v'yotzi'im me'tzara l'rivcha u'me'afela le'ora u'mishiv'ut Ligula, Hashta Bagalala Vizman Kari V'imru Amen. May those who are held captive find their way to freedom. May they find compassion. May they find expansiveness and go from darkness to light, from captivity to redemption, and quickly, speedily in our days. And let us say, Amen.